Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Filter. On this show, we recognize that the world can be a confusing place to live in. And so what I seek to do on this show is to equip you to live with biblical clarity in our confusing world so that you can face the chaos of life with wisdom, integrity, and courage. I'm glad to welcome onto the show today, Ned Bustard. We talked about his latest children's book for IVP called Saint Patrick the Forgiver. It's an awesome book in a series that he's doing looking at different figures from history that we celebrate today, but we often don't really know about their real lives. It's filled with his own original hand-drawn illustrations, and I'm a big fan of it, and so is my family. In this conversation, we talked about the real story of St. Patrick, his life, what he did as a missionary in Ireland, and also what we can learn about his story and apply it to our lives today, as well as how learning about his real story can affect the way that we celebrate St. Patrick's Day today. Ned Bustard is a graphic designer, a children's book illustrator, an author, and printmaker. As the creative director for Square Halo Books and curator of the Square Halo Gallery, Ned has lectured at colleges, schools, churches, and conferences. His work is found in numerous titles, including Saint Nicholas the Giftgiver, The O in Hope, Revealed, a Storybook Bible for Grown-Ups, and Every Moment Holy. He lives with his family in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Before we get into this conversation, let me encourage you to subscribe to Filter wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Also, click on the link to the show notes below and you can subscribe to our email list so that you can get an email in your inbox every time a new episode drops with one of our great guests. Lastly, if you're helped by this episode or any of our other episodes here on Filter, let me please encourage you to leave Filter a rating and review wherever you get your podcast, and also share this show with your friends. Leave Filter a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and also leave Filter a review on Apple Podcast. Where if you take these simple steps, it'll only take a minute of your time, but it greatly helps us to get the message of biblical clarity out to more people. Well, without any further delay, let's jump into this great conversation that I got to have with Ned Bustard. Ned, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on. I've enjoyed making a little bit of small talk and getting to know you. And as I was telling you before, I've enjoyed your books. So I've been looking forward to getting to talk to you today. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got to where you are now, authoring and publishing these great children's books.
Yeah, the second part of the question, I have no idea. That's the fun part. Like, people will come up to me and say, so I want to get into doing kids' books. What do you recommend? And I'm like, I don't know, work of God, miracles. Those are all very effective ways to do this. My day job is I'm a graphic designer. I do logos and books, and I've done a lot with the homeschool market, and I've got a book publishing company. So I'm doing a lot with print. I love books. As a child, I watched the movie Fahrenheit 451, and it ingrained in me the fact that I need to preserve books for at all costs. So that's what I do. And each day is different with my work, and I enjoy that. The kids' books thing is a relatively recent development in my career. Like I said, I've done a lot of work with the homeschool market, and really enjoy that. Several years ago, I did some books for Crossway, and they've got a church history ABCs and a couple other books I did. But the recent books, the Saint Nicholas that you know of, and the Saint Patrick we're talking about today, are from University Press, and that's a new thing, and that really is an amazing event in my life, because it all started with my wife and I coming across a poem by Lucy Shaw, who were a big fan of her poetry, and found one of her poems. We were reading it and said, this should be a kid's book. And I tell people, you never do pro bono work or spec work. That's a bad thing. But that's what I did. I illustrated an entire book based on Lucy's poem, sent it to her, said, I think this would be great. And she had friends at universities, sent it over to them just to say, oh, isn't this neat? Someone did something with one of my poems in this way. And they said, well, you don't know this, but we're actually starting a kids line, and can we use this book for our kids line of books? So the Owen Hope was how that happened. So yeah, can that be replicated? No. So if you're listening in saying, "Oh, how can I get into doing kids books?" This podcast will be of no help to you.
So sorry to anyone who was hoping to get that from this episode.
Yeah, too bad.
Yeah. But yeah, wow, that's really cool, because I was wondering, like, what gave you the idea to start doing this series, and it seems as though it's something that just came from spur of the moment inspiration, a sort of creative outlet, and then God's blessed it, and now He's turning it into a whole series.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of the second part of this story was after they said they wanted to do the Lucy Shaw book. I said, well, I've been working on this other book for about 20 years, and that was the Saint Nicholas book. I had started it, over 20 years ago now, because my daughter's pushing 30. So I wrote it for her, and because I wanted to have my kids have a book that conveyed the magic and fun and mystery of Christmas and Santa Claus, but also focusing on Christ and not losing that. And that's a hard sell. There aren't a lot of books out there that do both of those things. You either get magic or you get the mystery of the incarnation, but never both. And so I pitched InterVarsity on that idea, and that's how this series started. It's kind of funny. After we did that book, and I was like, "Oh, this is great." I sent some other ideas their way, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't like any of these ideas, but we do like the Saint Nicholas. What do you think about Saint Patrick?" And I said, "Absolutely. I like Saint Patrick even more than Saint Nicholas." So I was happy to pursue this idea with them.
Yeah, I have the Saint Nicholas book, and it's called Saint Nicholas the Giftgiver, and I'll link that in the show notes for anyone who's interested. And I've had that one, and we at Christmas time we keep it with our Christmas decorations, and so at Christmas time, and for us, we start putting up our decorations right after Halloween. We are very early. We're very early. We love Christmas. I'm a huge Christmas person, and I love all of it. The decorations, the food, the music, the traditions, everything. And so thankfully my family does as well. So
I'm glad that I can be part of that big production.
Yeah, well, your book is a part of it now. We keep it with our decorations, and we take it out at the same time that we start putting up the tree and everything else, and we keep it out there. And we have a few other books as well. And but that's one of the books.
But those are leftovers from before. Now that you have the St. Nicholas, you can get rid of those other books. Yeah,
this was the prime. This is the primary. But it's one of the ones that we really do. We regularly read out with the kids a couple times over the course of the Christmas time, Advent season, and the kids love it, and I love it. I've recommended it to so many people because, and I've got to say, like you really do strike that balance so well. The way that it tells the story. On a kid's level, but tells the story of the real St. Nicholas so well. And then just, the transition from the history into the myth is just, it's seamless and it's so cool. And the first time I read it, I was so impressed, and I knew, okay, this is one that we're going to come back to again and again.
Oh, that's great. Well, not everyone feels that way. If you look at the reviews online, some people are really upset because, it's because I'm doing both, and they get really, crotchety about it. Yeah. The fact that you like that book so much, I feel like I need to walk you through each of the illustrations, because a lot of the illustrations have like little Easter eggs. Of course, it's Christmas. So Christmas eggs, Christmas little surprises that are in each illustration. Because there's so much that you could talk about that I couldn't get all into the story, I would put little things in there so that if you know the real story of Nicholas, you can say, oh, yeah, there's that thing that he worked in but didn't talk about.
Yeah. Well, like I said before we started recording, we could certainly do another episode on the St. Nicholas story later this year, and we could go through some of those. But I did want to talk to you about just the illustration design, because both of these books, and you guys who are listening, go check these out later, and you'll get to see both the books have a really distinctive and unique look and style to them. And so tell us about that part of both of the books, the St. Nicholas and St. Patrick, how the illustrations came about and what went into that.
Yeah, the illustrations are all Lino cut prints, folks, when they see them, will often say, "Oh, that's a woodcut," which is functionally the same thing. It's the same technology, but instead of carving into wood, which is really hard, I carve into linoleum, which is a lot easier to carve. And so it's if you can picture a woodcut, that's what it is. I've carved into this material. Everything I wanted to be white, I carve out. Everything I leave is black, and I take my brayer and I put ink on it, put paper down, and the image is then pulled off. It's in the reverse, and so if I ever have words on a picture, I have to do them backwards, and then I scan that into the computer, and then I add color. You can do multiple colors with printmaking. Obviously, people have done it, but I like to. The computer affords me a lot of freedoms that with color, so I can really make the colors vibrant and they transfer well. So it's a combination of that. But I really like the technology, the look of the printmaking, because it gives it a very because it is handmade, very handmade, rooted, kind of authentic feel. I love everything King Arthur and Middle Ages and such like that. So I love old Bibles, and I just love that look. In fact, when I was working on the Saint Nicholas book we were talking about, I hadn't learned how to do printmaking yet, but I loved the look of printmaking. So I drew illustrations that mimicked the style of woodcuts. And eventually I was able to catch up to my initial vision. And so both of them have that look. And when you look at the books, I was looking at them last night. I'm actually having an art show tomorrow night with the St. Patrick stuff in my gallery. And I was looking and I realized when you look at the illustrations in the book, they're almost 100%. So I'm working almost at that size. I think I blow them up a little bit, but you're really getting almost a one-to-one. Like this is real, tactile. You see some of the mistakes. You see the grittiness of the material coming through, all to give that authentic feel that so often a lot of the new illustrations folks are doing on their iPads and things have a very slick, computer generated feel, and I wanted to do the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think that obviously our words convey messages, and that's the primary way we communicate is through our words. But we can also convey messages and meaning through art and aesthetics. And so, other than just having a prior appreciation for this kind of older art form, why did you think that this art form would really go well with what you're communicating in these books? In other words, what are you communicating through this distinctive art style?
Yeah, well, if you look at the Lucy Shaw book I mentioned earlier, that is all cut paper, and that was it has a completely different aesthetic because the poem kind of dictated that I actually initially started to illustrate that book in a style that's more akin to what I have here, but I found that it was the harsh edges and the grittiness of the printmaking didn't really serve the story well. But with these, because they're old saints and it's church history, it's historic, it's old. The printmaking really serves the story. It communicates the context. Even though both saints live hundreds of years apart, we as modern readers look back and can. I think it helps gives us context, visual context for what we're reading, and also just I think that there's the earthiness of it. I think is really helpful. Maybe not so much with Patrick, but like Nicholas, because of Santa Claus, it's easy for us to disconnect ourselves from those people. I mean, they're real people. They're not like figments of our imagination. I mean, Santa Claus might be, but like Saint Nicholas is Saint Nicholas. He's a real guy who served Jesus and lived a long time ago. And same with Saint Patrick. These are our forefathers in the faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree that these particular aesthetics that you're using provide just more authenticity and realness. You know, the fact that there is handwork, like real handwork done in these, even through the scanning and coloring process and then being printed on page, it comes through. And so adding that realness does help to communicate the message of both the St. Nicholas and St. Patrick books, that, hey, these are real people, that they're not just, they weren't made up for just an American holiday and so on, but they were actually based on real people. And you tell us the story behind what has become the myth now. And then it makes you appreciate even the celebrations and holidays we have now even more. But you mentioned before that, so the St. Nick book came first, and like I said, I'd love to do a future episode on that story. But then you got to do the St. Patrick book next, and you said before that you were even more excited to do that one. So why St. Patrick? What drew you and made you excited to get to do this book?
Well, I'm third generation Irish. My family comes from Donegal on the northwest coast of Ireland. When I was a teenager, my dad had us go over and visit. I sat in the field of the Bustards, the Bustard farm, and got to see the little shed where my great grandfather was born, and talked to the cows and that are on the Bustard farm. So for me, Ireland it's very much of who I am. Being Irish is very much my identity. Growing up, we would celebrate St. Patrick's Day, I think, with a little bit more zeal than other folks. I was always very, very hardcore about how much green I wore on St. Patrick's Day. My Irish grandmother would make soda bread for us and had this nice old Irish or cast metal pot, but it was all the real thing. And then in college, I went to did a short-term missions trip in Dublin, Ireland. It was actually they had English as second language classes, and folks would come over from Europe and to learn English. And that was when I spent time there doing that and discovered the Book of Kells. And then it wasn't just the Irish heritage that I had, but now there was a visual element to it, that the Celtic knotwork and just the way that they drew their figures and all these things combined in me to just get me very, very excited about being Irish. And that really informed all of my art making from then on, that I don't put Celtic knots in everything, but that there is this old, I liked the oldness of it. I liked the rootedness of it. I liked that this was my visual language. I'm a big fan of German expressionist printmakers, and they do what they do, or they did what they did because they said printmaking is part of our visual heritage. They had these old German Bibles, and they said that's what we want to go back to. That now they didn't go back to looking like the artwork from the Middle Ages, but they said this is who we are. I'm gonna invest in my visual heritage, and I think that that's what I do with my artwork. Is I'm investing in who I am as a person. That this is my visual language. I don't. Mm-hmm. I really love. There's an artist named Sadao Watanabe, who a Japanese artist that I love his work, and actually have ripped off several things of his. He died in 1995, I think, so he can't follow me. But there's things that I do lift from him, because we draw from all these different elements when we're making our art. But for me, I'm like, okay, I can't really do Japanese art. That's really not it's not my people. I love it. I can lift elements, but this Irish artwork, it's who I am. And I feel like that is something I can really dig down deep and draw from. And it's a very generative well, not digging wells. Yeah, I can mix those metaphors. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of personal meaning for you there, and particularly with the heritage and the artwork. I think that a lot of people don't know anything more about St. Patrick beyond just shamrocks and pots of gold and green beer. So tell us about the story of the real St. Patrick. This was a real guy. When did he live? And what did he do that made him such a massive figure in history that we still know his name today?
Yeah, that's one of the things I try. I've been posting on Instagram or pictures of Irish St. Patrick's Day decorations, and then putting it next to my book and saying, these don't line up. Like, there's no leprechauns in my book. There's no pots of gold. There's no rainbows. There's no pukas. There's no selkies. There's all the Irish stuff, and it's just not there, because what I'm looking at is a figure who, well, for one thing, he wasn't Irish, which is that causes some people surprise. He was he grew up in England, Britannia at the time, of course, and he was the son of a sexton. His grandfather was a priest, and so he would have been kind of maybe upper middle class, maybe ruling class there in the Roman culture. And when he was around 15, he was stolen by Vikings. They came down and took him off, and then was taken to Ireland and made a slave in Ireland. He was made to take care of sheep and serve there for a great while. And what's interesting too is he became a Christian at that point. He was raised in the church, but really it wasn't part of his. He hadn't really embraced Christ at that point. But it was when he was a slave, standing in the rain, watching the sheep, that the Lord came to him, and really he became a man of prayer. What I think is interesting about him, we look back and we say, well, why do we still talk about Patrick? I don't think it's anything about Patrick necessarily. I think that he was someone that God just chose to use. I think he seemed to have quite he seemed to be a zealous person. He obviously loved the Lord. He was a man of prayer. But I think he just responded to the call that God gave him at the time and place, which I think, that's all that any of us can do. A lot of times when we're teaching our kids Sunday school lessons, we'll say, you always hear the thing, dare to be a Daniel, or go after and strike down giants like David. I don't think that that's helpful, and I think that's not really what we want to do with Patrick either. I think we want to see Patrick as an example of faithfulness and response to what the Lord has provided, the calling that God has given you. As far as more of his story, while he's a shepherd, he is praying, he's growing in his faith, and he receives a vision that says, you're going home, and pack your bags. And so he did that, and he set off, and I think he walked like 100 or 200 miles, like a long distance, found Port Town, got on a boat with folks who they think were shipping Irish wolfhounds to the mainland, which comes in. It's one of those things in my story I don't talk about in there, but if you look at the illustrations, at one point when there's the homecoming image where he's seeing his mom and dad, and there's a boat, and there's these Irish wolfhounds jumping out of the boat. And I think tons of people are going to be like, why are there these giant dogs there? Yeah. Well, now at least your listeners know that's why they're there. Because they were lost for a long time after they got across the channel, and were excited because they came across wild pigs, and they ate wild pigs, and they said, we kept the dogs, and people are like, why would they have not eaten the dogs? Well, it turns out that's why they think that was what the ship ship guys were selling to the mainland. So he gets home. He's reunited with his parents. Everything's great. And the Lord sends another vision. And in it, there's a man comes from Ireland with these letters that say, come back, walk again among us. And he then enters the ministry and is trained and prepared, and then goes back to Ireland and lands in the north first. There's Saul's church. It's there to this day. It's obviously not the same building, but the High King's brother was converted, gave him a barn to be his first church, and he started his ministry, and then went throughout Ireland trying to share the gospel.
Yeah, so it's an amazing story because as a slave, he finally receives Christ and then is freed, but then is called to go back to his slave masters, essentially to the people who had held him captive. And so, in your book, you call him, or in the title, you call him Saint Patrick the Forgiver. Explain how that theme of forgiveness plays such a prominent role in his story, and especially in his answering the call of God to go back to the Irish people.
Yeah, well, that was the thing that really struck me when I was talking to the folks at IVP Kids when we were talking about doing this book. Talked about the idea of doing a St. Patrick book and the different things, and that was one of the things that came out in a conversation with my editor. Almost immediately, we were talking, and I said, the life of forgiveness, the fact that you could be a slave and then go back and forgive and serve there's one thing to say, well, I forgive you, but then you have nothing to do with that person ever again. But this guy forgave and then went back and served and served and served, and that when we were talking, it was like, oh, of course, this is the perfect thing to focus on. Rather than leprechauns, rather than just the Irishness of it, the fact that here's a story of forgiveness, that here's a man who really shouldn't have gone back. There was no reason for him to go back. Even if he came to grips with, okay, well, I was a slave, but now I'm free and now I can live my life safely in England. Now he went back and he lived a life of forgiveness. And I think that would have been a challenge. Even, you talk about folks with PTSD and stuff. I don't know how you go back there and it's not a continual struggle. Because, it wasn't a Christian land. He went back to a land that was very pagan, and he had to, person by person, share the gospel. And now they think that he probably was originally ministering to other Christian slaves, like he had the similar experience. So even so, though, even if that's his initial church body, he is going back and doing the hard work of reaching out to folks who made his life miserable for many years. Yeah.
Now, going back to these people that obviously you have a relationship that could be described as having baggage.
Right.
There's that element that makes this missionary endeavor a little difficult, but also that he's going back to a people who, as you said before, were pretty rough. They were extremely pagan, and from what I remember, they were not civilized very much at all. They were quite a barbarian people, and so that gives you a pretty difficult missionary challenge. Can you talk about his missionary strategy and what he did and to bring the gospel to the Celtic people this time, the way that he preached against their pagan religion and called them to Christ?
Well, I can speak some to that. I think as far as culturally, he's coming from a Roman background. Now, granted, it's the Roman culture on the edge of the empire. So, Britannia, which is now England, would have been the outer ring of the empire. So, civilization, like folks in Rome, would have looked at he and his family in England being kind of the country hicks But compared to the Irish, it was high civilization next to crazy folks. Now, the Irish has a culture, and being a good Irishman, I would bristle against saying that they were barbarians, but not too hard. I don't know if I'd fight too hard against that.
Yeah.
It was that was the outer edge of the world. There was nothing beyond Ireland. This is as far as you can go, and they were a very warlike people. Later on, when the church takes root, one of the things that they really had to struggle with is culturally, the Irish were very much for fighting, for battles, and they wanted to. They convert to Christ, but they want to still be martyrs and have these like epic lives. So you see a lot of missionary work happening and coming from the Irish people because they wanted something. They wanted to do great things for God and make these great sacrifices. And so you're coming into a very warlike culture, a very pagan culture. The Philip Freeman talks about in his book on St. Patrick. Is it Philip Freeman? It might be in How the Irish Saved Civilization. Cal. I read a couple books on this, but the High King would I think have sex with a horse as part of his becoming king. Like it was a very, very, to us at least, very, very bizarre, hostile, anti-Christian. Like I don't know how much farther you can go away from Christianity, and he's jumping, parachuting into that. Yeah. As far as his methodology, like I said, he went to the north first and converted the leadership there, the king's brother, and was formed a base. Then got his first church at Saul's church, and then moved through ministering bit by bit around the country. He would set up monasteries and such, which I think is one of those things that us looking now and what do we model from Patrick? And I think for me, I'm very much of small. Small is better. I like the book Small Church. I think that there's a lot to neighborliness, the rootedness, the locality. I think culturally we like to have the big churches. Like how big can my church be? But I think that he was going and forming these small communities all through the country. And I think that is how real change happened and how real change does happen, even today.
Yeah. Yeah, his missionary strategy and perseverance in his evangelism is quite a story to read because he was dealing with quite a culture.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of common ground. A lot of times, we only have a common ideology or something. But this was it was hostile to Christianity, and but as far as folks today, you look. And a lot of folks will say that we're in a post-Christian culture and stuff. So I think that we can be encouraged and energized by Patrick's story to say, well, it could be worse. And it could be a lot worse, and God's going to do His work regardless of the impediments.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you reflect on the story of St. Patrick as a whole, and we've already pulled a couple of applications from it, what do you think are some of the lessons that we can learn from the story of the real St. Patrick that very much applies to our lives today?
Well, one of the things, and I don't know if I think I said this already, but just the humility of Patrick, the humbleness. I think that a lot of times we feel that we can't do anything because we don't have a big platform, or we don't have a big name, or we're not gifted in certain ways. But I don't think there was anything special about Patrick. I think that he grew up into who God wanted him to be. And I think that would be what I'd want people to take away from this. Besides his bold willingness to put himself out there and really proclaim the gospel clearly, I think it was the fact that he was just a guy. like, as far as I can tell, there wasn't anything special about him. And I think that certainly in our celebrity age, we need to remember that that's who God uses. He doesn't really use, great people. He makes them great. We are his vessels.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what are the best ways that we can celebrate St. Patrick today? Ways that are better than the so-called St. Patrick celebrations that we see today that just revolve around.
No,
like
green beer. That's all we can do. Green beer and shamrocks, and let's put some leprechauns all over our windows and such.
Yeah. From what I've seen, so I'm in South Louisiana, and so Mardi Gras is huge down here.
Oh, right.
And Mardi Gras is just absolutely it's wild. And from what I've seen, St. Patrick's Day is basically Mardi Gras for the Northeast.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot to be. I think you can make a case for that.
Yeah, it's just green Mardi Gras instead of purple and gold Mardi Gras. So so better than what our current celebrations are.
Yeah, one of the things at the store I saw the other day when I was taking pictures of stuff that I thought was like, this is horrible, this is so un-St. Patrick, is they had the Mardi Gras necklaces, but they were just green. It's like, well, okay, we can't do a lot of colors, but we'll do the green. Yeah, I think that I had friends from church who they would have a St. Patrick's Day party every year and serve like corned beef hash or something, like an Irish meal. But they got together to celebrate St. Patrick, and that was their way. They're like, okay, we're not going to do green beer. We're going to actually focus on this guy. In my family, we would my grandmother would make Irish soda bread. We make Irish soda bread, and we also would make Irish potatoes, which are little candies. It's coconut cream and wrapped in cinnamon, and they're very delicious. So we would do things that would be non debaucherous, I guess, and but then just focus on who Patrick was. And I think that's if we can do that, it's kind of we can reclaim the holiday for actually St. Patrick and focus on his work and just I think so much of what we do and or should do is just telling the right stories. Let's just correct the stories because we're surrounded by people that tell us different stories that they aren't the stories of the history of Christianity, the spread of the gospel. We are part of this great story that Christ began, and this new reality. And I think that we need to keep telling ourselves these stories over and over and say, yeah, actually there was this guy, St. Patrick, and this is the context in which he worked, and this is the change that God did in his lifetime, and the ramifications are still being felt today. And I think if we do that is what we need to do that, because that's what's going to be helpful. That's going to be the way that we reorient ourselves and rethink our thoughts. We need to have new minds. Scripture talks about that, but I think that I think culturally, it's like, who am I as a person? I'm part of this, even if I'm not Irish. If I'm part of the church, I'm part of this work that Patrick was part of, and he's part of me, and I'm part of him. And getting that identity, like I said, growing up, it was very important to me and my family that we were Irish. That was a story we told. So therefore, on St. Patrick's Day, I would wear green. On Orangeman's Day, I would wear orange. And this was part of who I was. And it didn't really matter that other people weren't doing that, because I knew that was who I was as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, because I think that stories are powerful, and because they inspire, and we start to understand the world that we are living in and the story that we're living in through the stories that we take in. We start to utilize the story arcs that we're taking in from books, movies, history, and so on to make sense of what we are going through now and to interpret what we're living through now. And, I think we can, and because God makes us active agents who are participating in the story arc of our lives, we can take the story arcs of other lives and of the inspiring stories that we see and hear and try to start applying them to what we're living in. And so, my hope is just that through telling the real story of St. Patrick, that it would inspire St. Patrick's today. People who are being self-sacrificing missionaries in their neighborhoods or workplaces, who are doing whatever they can, even if they aren't themselves extraordinary people, just being the normal person they are and allowing God to use them, and creating small communities of people who are following God and trying to live out his will in their lives, just like Patrick did with the ancient Celts. I think that's the real power and hope here, by knowing the true story and celebrating it well, that we would then try to start applying his story arc to ours.
Preach it, brother. Sounds great. I'm all for it.
Well, and that's why you wrote the book.
Yep. Yeah.
Any final takeaways that you want, you hope someone who listened to this episode or who gets the book, reads it for themselves or with their kids, what do you hope they take away from your book and from this conversation?
From this conversation, maybe that Ned Bustard, he talks too much. He should just be quiet and draw pictures. I don't know. From this, what I do hope that my secret desire for the book is, number one, well, obviously people will buy it and they'll read it. But like I said, with the Saint Nicholas, with Saint Patrick, I put a lot of extra things into the illustrations that aren't referenced in the story. So I would hope that people would be so intrigued by Patrick that they would do the extra work of, here's this picture of Patrick and he's got this bell and he's ringing this bell. What is that? I need to look into that, investigate. And spoiler alert, there actually is still a bell, St. Patrick's bell. It's in a museum in Ireland. It's a real thing. But then there's also I have the high cross of Patrick from illustrated in there, that he's raising this cross, and there's different things like that throughout the book that I would hope that people would say, oh, this is worth spending some time to really do a deep dive and investigate more, so that they would learn that this guy was real, that this is a real thing, this is a rooted story, and it can be their story. Yeah.
So before we close, real quick, let's say someone reads the book and then they're inspired to learn more about the story of Patrick. What would be maybe the first resource that you would point them to explore that story more?
Well, for adults, there's Philip Freeman has a book, St. Patrick, a biography, I believe is the title. And I actually read through that and was very inspired when I was doing my research. So that's something. It's not for kids; it's for adults. But I would recommend that. That would be the first thing I would do. And after that, I would just start Googling Patrick, because the thing is, you're going to come across a lot of leprechauns and green beer, but there is stuff out there. But yeah, I recommend Freeman's book. How the Irish Saved a Civilization is a good book. Again, this is more for adults, and it's my wife and I are history nerds, so this is stuff that we like. If you don't like history, it might be a hard pill to swallow. Maybe you just read my book again, and that might be enough for you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll have those resources linked in the show notes for anyone who's interested in looking into those as well. Get a copy of St. Patrick the Forgiver, as well as one of those other books. I have the Cahill book, and he's excellent. So yeah, get one of those other ones. There's also an excellent book called The Celtic Way of Evangelism by, it's somewhere behind me on my bookshelves. It's either Michael Green.
If you stand away from the microphone, I think I can see it right behind you. And you mentioned that. I actually have a book called The Celtic Vision, which is just a collection of prayers from the Outer Hebrides, which is fantastic. Just the way that the Celts approached prayer is just different than we do. Obviously, praying to God, but it's very much organic, very part of their their everyday life, and I'd highly recommend that book as well.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'll include those resources in the show notes as well, so y'all can get look into that for any of you guys who are like me and Ned and you're history nerds. Then you can look into those as well, because history is not just old data, but it is powerful stories that can shape today.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage you guys to look into that. So yeah, Ned, once again, just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, and thank you also for the books that you've been working on with great care, and the storytelling and the artwork. Like I said, it's benefited my family, and so I want to thank you for that personally. And
I'm so glad.
Thanks for the work you're doing, and appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you for it all. It's been great.
Thanks for listening. I hope this episode provided you with biblical clarity to live with confidence in our confusing world. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can go to my website, aaronchamp.com. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter so that you can be updated anytime I share new content. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Aaron M. Champ. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Until then, hold fast to the anchor.